I decided to do the official Oxford walking tour. I'm not actually sure what makes it official. It may just be the name. I certainly saw nothing to make it official. But anyway, it meets outside the Britannia bookstore here on Broad Street. And I booked it online. It was easy via the website. They have several tours. You don't just have to do this one. There was a Harry Potter tour meeting just down the road. But I did the Oxford University City Walking Tour, which I think was £21. There are certainly plenty of other walking tours available, not just from this company. There was a company, for example, offering walking tours with Oxford University students, which would be quite interesting. For me, the major advantage of taking a walking tour in Oxford, apart from the obvious information that you gain, is that most of medieval Oxford, the centre at least, is pedestrianised. So if you want to understand Oxford and see Oxford and its history, you really have to walk around it. I did a bus tour earlier, I have a video on that. It was very good, but you cannot do the centre of Oxford because of this pedestrianisation. Anyway, I'll let Matthew, our tour guide, make the introductions, and then I will narrate through this video with a little bit of commentary from Matthew again.
Okay, so welcome to Oxford. I'm Matthew, and I'll be taking you around for the next couple of hours around a little part of Oxford, around the medieval part of Oxford, to show you some of the best sites, or what I personally think are the best sites. Now, it is a bit of a first for a tour. We're taking you into Jesus College today, so which is a rather delightful smaller college just down Hill Street here. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about the story of Oxford in a sense, because the thing about the story of Oxford is it's very much linked in with the story of England.
So we start off walking down Broad Street, and people who watch me regularly know that I'm interested in history, and I normally try and do these videos in a chronological order, but with a walking tour like this it's not possible. So we're going to start off in the 15th century and with Bloody Queen Mary. And on Broad Street at this spot there were four religious martyrs burnt at the stake, including Thomas Cranmer in 1556, who was at the time the Archbishop of Canterbury. We then jump back 300 years in time to Balliol College and its founding in 1263 by John le Balliol, a wealthy landowner from Durham who had to found this college as penance for upsetting the Bishop of Durham. He was also whipped in front of Durham Cathedral for his troubles. We then continue down Broad Street and leap forward 400 years to look at the Sheldonian Theatre, which was designed by Sir Christopher Wren in 1664, before the Great Plague and the Fire of London. And this was his second building, and Wren himself was a graduate of Oxford. It's located next door to the old Ashmolean Museum, which is now the Science Museum, the Ashmolean Museum having outgrown this building and moved in about 1853. Wren was a bit of a trailblazer when it came to architecture and actually employed a mathematician in the design and development of his buildings. The one he used in this instance was a gentleman called Robert Hooke, who is actually an extremely famous scientist in his own right, and Hooke, Wren and other luminaries from Oxford and Cambridge, such as Halley and Newton, went on to found the Royal Society in London. And now we see one of the most famous and photographed sites in Oxford, the Bridge of Sighs.
Strangely, it's not one of the oldest bits. It was built about 1911, and it basically is part of Hertford College. That's Hertford College there. That's Hertford College there. And obviously they wanted to link the two together.
The bridge actually gets its name from its similarity to the Bridge of Sighs in Venice, built in 1600 and named the Bridge of Sighs by Lord Byron in the early 1900s. It connected the palace in Venice to the prison, and prisoners would sigh as they crossed the bridge, knowing that they wouldn't go back across again. Passing under the bridge itself, we pause to begin our exploration of medieval Oxford. Oxford, of course, is in its heart a medieval town, and the centre of Oxford is a rabbit warren of unplanned streets and alleyways. And it's down here that we get our first glimpse of medieval Oxford itself.
And you see it says Turf Tavern, and it's an old pub which is outside the city walls, an old medieval pub. So I want you to go down there and just have a look to the right. And when you look to the right, you will see the city walls as they were. They're in all their magnificence, okay? So it'll give you an idea what this city used to be like when the university started to put colleges inside the city walls.
As late as the mid-17th century, during the English Civil War, Oxford remained a walled medieval city. We can see the only remaining part of the wall as it once stood here. During the English Civil War of 1642 to 1649, Charles I actually headquartered himself within the medieval compound of Oxford itself due to its defensive capabilities. His enemy, the parliamentarians, headquartered themselves in the castle at Windsor, so there was barely 40 miles separating the two opposing sides. I have a video on the history of Windsor and the development of the castle if you're interested. These fine 17th century houses were built within the medieval city itself, and the red brick house on the left is where Sir Edmund Halley lived, if anyone knows of Halley's Comet and the astronomer Sir Edmund Halley, with the wall just behind. We walk back down the road under the Bridge of Sighs again and are once again greeted by the sight of Wren's Sheldonian Theatre, which was actually built as a place of celebration for Oxford University and is still used to this day for graduations. It's here we encounter the other feature of student life, that of protest and free thinking, as important as any other study that could be done at Oxford. We now walk down to and enter the Bodleian Library here on the right. The Bodleian was established in 1602 by Thomas Bodley, who in 1598 wrote to the Vice-Chancellor of the University suggesting that the current library facilities be upgraded and that he would take responsibility for financing and organising this. As we enter the school's quadrangle, as it is known, we're actually looking at two periods of development. Directly in front of us is the Divinity School, which housed the original library and was completed in 1488. To the sides and to the rear are additional schools which were added after Bodley's death between about 1613 and 1619. But these individual buildings held philosophical, arts and divinity schools, which at the time, prior to the Reformation, were the typical subjects being taught in Oxford University. The Bodleian Library itself has expanded considerably since these buildings were built and is now housed principally underground, under our feet as we speak, and also in warehouses around Oxford, with upwards of 15 million books being held. And these books cannot be lent. They are reference books. They must be read on site so that the Bodleian Library is not depleted in any way through its use by the students and staff.
Okay, so this is the reading room for the Bodleian Library. This was built in about the early 1700s, 1730 to 40.
The Radcliffe Camera, or reading room that we see here, was constructed and completed in 1749 and was a library in its own right, but ultimately was designed as a reading room for the Bodleian Library so that students who were unable to take the books from the library itself could read them on site. And the Radcliffe Camera is really right at the heart or the centre of medieval Oxford as it once stood. To the right, or west of the Camera, we have Brasenose College, which was founded in 1509, but there was a hall called Brasenose Hall on this site from at least 1279, and it is considered one of the original colleges of the university. The name Brasenose came from the brass knocker that adorned the front door of the hall and later the college itself. In front of us we see the University Church of St Mary's. There's been a church on this site, a parish church, since at least 1086, 2 years after the founding of Oxford Castle. But the current church, as we see it, was really founded in about 1320 and was used for all sorts. Trials of the Martyrs of Oxford, it was used for graduation ceremonies and examinations. It was only in the 17th century, with the construction of buildings such as the Radcliffe Camera and the Sheldonian Theatre, that these activities moved out of the church and it became purely a religious centre again. In front of us now and to the east of the Camera, we have All Souls College, which was founded in 1438, and it was founded to commemorate the victims of the 100 Years' War, hence the name All Souls. Since the 1700s, the college has been what was known as a postgraduate college only. In other words, it does not accept undergraduates, but only those who already have degrees and therefore are automatically fellows of the University of Oxford. The entrance examination for this college is considered one of the hardest in the world, with 5 papers having to be sat on your specialist subject, and you do not get a question for each paper, but simply a word. To complete each paper successfully, you must write about that word and make it entirely relevant to your specialist subject, that which you're hoping to study. Leaving All Souls College, we now turn back to the north, and in front of us we see yet again the Bodleian Library, and to the left, to the west of this immediately, Exeter College. Leaving the absolute medieval centre of Oxford, we now walk down the medieval streets, which are very narrow and very old, and there's no planning to these. They have a quintessential charm to them, and the architecture is that of 14th century through to 17th century. And we walk down towards Jesus College, where our tour is going to allow us access today. As proudly proclaimed at the doorstep, the first woman was allowed to study at Jesus College in 1974. And Jesus College is always proud of being progressive, and this does make it one of the earliest colleges to accept women here at Oxford in an environment that had been traditionally male-dominated. Women have been able to study at Oxford at St Hilda's College and other women-only colleges since 1920 and gain degrees, but it's only recently, very recently, that the male-dominated colleges have allowed access to women themselves. All students who study at Oxford belong to a college, and there are 39 colleges at Oxford. The most recent opened in 2019 with permission from Her Majesty the Queen, and that was Reuben College. But the foundation or history of these colleges is in religious times, in the medieval history, when they were religious orders established in Oxford itself.
Right, so this is Jesus College. You're in the first quad here. So Jesus College was formed in 1571, and it was formed by the founder was a guy called Hugh Price, who was a Welshman. And the college, since that time, has had a very strong association with Welsh people. Less so now, perhaps, than it did before, but it has still got a very strong association with Welsh people because the original founder was from Glamorgan in Wales. In fact, he was the treasurer for St David's Church. Although he was first trained in Osney Abbey in Oxford. Now, Osney Abbey in the Reformation was completely demolished, and it's roughly where the railway station is now.
Being founded as a religious order within the college, Jesus College, unsurprisingly, like all the older colleges, has its own chapel, and we're going to visit that now. We were lucky enough that there was a music student, an Oxford music student, practicing in the chapel while we were in there. So I'm going to shut up for a minute and allow you to join his practice session.
So we go to the right. Then, but this is very classical of an Oxford chapel. So if you look at the
Leaving the chapel, we now cross the quad and go to the other heart of any university college at Oxford, its dining room, where many formal dinners are set.
Is Elizabeth I. So she was the founder in 1571 of this college. And so she has pride of place. And you see the little portrait underneath? That's Hugh Price, who's the true founder of the college. Right?
The sides of the dining room are lined with portraits of famous individuals who graduated from the college. So, for example, on the left here we can see Edward Heath. He was Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in the 1970s. And to the right, perhaps even more famously, a portrait of T.E. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence graduated from Jesus College, Oxford, speaking fluent Arabic, and it was clearly of great advantage to him in his time in Arabia. Leaving the dining room, we enter the second quad of Jesus College. Jesus College actually has 4 quads, but the second one here was built in about 1640, and the following 2 subsequently as the college expanded. But it remains a very small college with perhaps 470 students. And as with all colleges at Oxford and indeed Cambridge, each college has a specialisation. Jesus College specialises in the humanities. At this point, our tour is really coming to an end. Here we are in Jesus College. We've seen the dining room and the chapel, and we're looking around the college at the accommodation for the undergraduates and the postgraduates. And at this point, our guide walks us back to the bookshop where we began our tour. So I hope you've enjoyed this little walk around Oxford, and I encourage you to do the same if you have a chance. Thank you.